This video is part of consumer theory. In it, I will continue the discussion of demand by considering what happens to demand when there's a change in income. In my video on demand, I showed you how changing the price of a good, holding all else constant, allows us to derive the demand curve for that good. In this video, I'll show you how changing income, holding all else constant, causes a demand curve to shift. That is, we can use the model of consumer choice to shift a demand curve. We will change income, holding all else constant. Changing income will cause a parallel shift in the budget line. Because the budget line shifts, the consumer will choose a new optimal bundle. And then this change in quantity demanded at the new optimal bundle is the information we need to draw the new shifted demand curve. I'll show you next. Let's return to the optimal choice diagram for beer and wine used in the demand video. Suppose a consumer is initially maximizing his utility by choosing bundle E1. At this bundle, his consumption of beer is 26.7 gallons and his consumption of wine is 2.8 gallons per year. Now holding the price of beer, the price of wine, and the overall preferences, meaning the overall utility function that generates these indifference curves constant, let's increase income. Increasing income causes a parallel shift outward in the budget line. Because income increases, the consumer's affordable set expands, which allows him to move to a higher indifference curve. He now maximizes his utility by buying more beer and more wine per year than before. Again, if we increase income holding all else constant, there will be a parallel shift out in the budget line. The consumer will be able to reach a higher indifference curve by choosing to buy both more beer and more wine per year. An income consumption curve is when we connect all the utility maximizing bundles as income changes. In other words, an income consumption curve shows what happens to consumption of both goods as income changes. Now let's look at how changing income affects demand. On this graph here, we have beer in gallons per year plotted on the x-axis, just like the graph above. But unlike the graph above, we have the price of beer on the y-axis. At the original chosen bundle E1, the consumer was choosing 26.7 gallons of beer per year. From the demand video, the price of beer at that bundle was $12. When income increased, the consumer chose E2 with 38.2 gallons of beer per year, but the price of beer hasn't changed. So E1 and E2 both correspond to the same price, but different quantities of beer. Income going up again caused the consumer to move to bundle E3, choosing 49.1 gallons of beer, but again, the price of beer was held fixed at $12. That means that each of these bundles is on a different demand curve. As income goes up, but holding the price of beer at 12, we see a shift in demand. Whereas an income consumption curve shows what happens to consumption of both goods as income changes, an angle curve shows what happens to consumption of only one good. Here we have the angle curve for beer, though we could have alternatively or additionally shown the angle curve for wine. An angle curve plots consumption of one good, the utility maximizing consumption levels, on the x-axis, and income on the y-axis. Here we see, again, as income went up, causing the budget line to shift out or causing demand to shift right, consumption of beer increased. More income, more beer led to an upward sloping angle curve. Whereas an income consumption curve shows what happens to consumption of both goods as income changes, an angle curve shows only what happens to consumption of one good. Whether or not an angle curve slopes up or down, or the direction of the shift in demand due to a change in income, depends on whether a good is normal or inferior. Recall from Econ 101 that normal goods are goods for which there is a positive or direct relationship between income and demand. These are goods that you buy more of when income goes up and less of when income goes down. Most goods are normal goods. Examples would include restaurant meals, salon haircuts, name brand cereal, good beer, or steak. Inferior goods, in comparison, are goods for which there is a negative or inverse relationship between income and demand. These are the goods that you buy less of as your income goes up and more of as your income goes down. Examples of inferior goods include frozen dinners, haircuts from Supercuts, generic cereal, cheap beer, or ground beef. Usually when we define a normal versus inferior good, we're talking about one good in relationship to the other. So for example, as my income goes up, I eat more at restaurants and then fewer frozen dinners. As my income goes down, I get fewer salon haircuts and more haircuts from a place like Supercuts. Some goods aren't only normal or only inferior. Instead, for some goods, whether a good's demand goes up or down as income increases depends on the income level. For example, let's consider fast food. For some preferences, fast food is a normal good for low income levels, but then switches to an inferior good for high income levels. That's what this graph here says. First, note that on the x-axis we have fast food meals per year, and on the y-axis we have every other good or a composite good. Initially, we see that increasing income causes the consumer's consumption of both goods to go up, but that as income increases again, consumption of fast food falls while consumption of other goods rises. That is, initially more income causes the demand for fast food to increase, but then more income causes the demand for fast food to decrease. The corresponding angle curve for fast food would then bend backwards. Initially, as income on the y-axis increases, fast food consumption on the x-axis increases too. That's a positive relationship, resulting in an upward sloping angle curve, reflecting that fast food is a normal good. However, on this graph, for income levels greater than $60,000 per year, an increase in income will now cause a reduction in fast food consumption. That is, once income surpasses $60,000 per year, now fast food is regarded as an inferior good, and the more income the consumer has, the less fast food they will consume.